today's video, I'm going to be covering some of the most used functions in Excel, lookup functions. Now, there are a number of lookup functions in Excel, so let's just go through them all one by one. So the first one I'm going to look at today is the HLOOKUP function, or what this actually means is the horizontal lookup. So I have a mock table here that we can just use to show how this function works. So I'm just going to type the formula into the formula bar. So that would just be HLOOKUP, and you'll get the little drop down here. You can just press tab or click it if you want. And then you get the parameters of what you need. So if we go through these one by one, so you've got here the first argument in this function is the lookup value. So this is obviously what you're going to be searching for. So I've labeled the lookup value here, so we can just click on that cell. Now, the table array, what that means is the range of data that you want to look up, essentially. So that will be this whole table here. And the row index number, so anything that's indexing just means the kind of position that it appears in the actual array that you specified, the table array. So in simple terms, what that means is it in row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, so on and so forth. So in terms of the row index number here, we want to return the value that's in the second row of the table array here. So you can see this would be row 1, and then this would be row 2. I'm just going to pop a 2 in here. Okay, so then we've got here range lookup. Now, you notice this one appears in square brackets. So anything that's in square brackets, you don't actually need. It's like an optional argument in the function. However, if we just look at it, all it will do is give the lookup type that you want to do. So you can see here you've got approximate match and exact match. So if you do an exact match, it will do exactly that. It will try and find the exact value that you're looking for. So this is particularly important when you're dealing with like text, for example. So if you say you want to search for the term yes, and it's all lowercase. However, in the data, there's only yes with all uppercase or capital letters. It won't find it if you do the exact match. If you did the approximate match, it probably would find it. So that's kind of the differences there. But for the sake of this example, we don't need it, so I'm just going to omit it, close that off, and press enter. Now, as you can see here, we've got the value A pop up. So if we look at this table in a bit more detail, we can see what we're working with here. So the HLOOKUP is looking across this row at the top here, looking for the value 1. Okay, so it finds the value 1, and then I specified it to return the value that's in the second row of the array, which is this one here. So it's found value 1, and it's gone, okay, I'm going to go to the second row now, which is down here. And it said, okay, well, in that cell is A, so I'm going to return A. And that's how this function works. So if we were to change the values, so let's say 2, you can see it's changed to B, and 3, changed to C, 4, changed to D, and 5, changed to E. So a nice, simple function there to work with. Now, one thing to be aware of with HLOOKUPs, and also when we get onto the next lookup function, the VLOOKUP function, this is the same for the VLOOKUP as well. You can, so for an HLOOKUP function, you can only look up below the row you've specified. So you can see here in this table array, this table is designed this way on purpose. So I can only search or return the value below where my lookup array is. So say, for example, if I wanted to find A and return the value 1, I couldn't do that with the HLOOKUP function because it's above where I'm looking up. It can only look down, it can't look up. Okay. The next function we're going to look at, as I mentioned earlier, is the VLOOKUP function, or the vertical lookup function. Now, this works exactly the same as the HLOOKUP, except you're now looking left to right instead of top to bottom. So if we look at the function again and see what the components are made of, I can't spell, you'll see it's pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is where on the HLOOKUP we had row index number, now we've got column index number because it's looking at the columns instead of the rows. So the lookup value is going to be the same as before. So I'm just going to put that cell in there. The table array, that's just the range of cells that you're going to look at, or a whole table if you have a whole table. So that's just going to be this one here. The column index number. So again, as before with the rows, you just count your rows. Here we're going to count the columns. So obviously the left-hand one here is going to be 1. So the second column is going to be number 2. So we're going to put 2 in here because we want to return the value in the second column. And again, the range lookup is the same as before. So approximate or exact match. Just be aware of any use cases where you might need to use these. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave it blank and pop that in there. And you can see we've got 1 here and it's returned the value A, which is correct. So if we look at the actual table and see what it's doing, so it's doing exactly the same as the HLOOKUP, as I said, just now with columns. So here's our lookup value. So it's looking up in the left-hand column here for this value 1, and it's returning what is in the second column. So that would be A here. Same if we change this to 2, you can see it's changed to B. Now, as I mentioned with the HLOOKUP, VLOOKUP works exactly the same. So you can only search left to right. You can't, so if I wanted to look up, say, A, for example, and return this value 1 here. So if I wanted to look up A and return 1, I couldn't do that because that would be what we called a left-hand lookup. So it's looking left of the lookup array. I can't do that with a VLOOKUP. It can only look right, to the right of where you find the lookup value. So again, just be aware of like when you're using your lookup functions, if you do have a use case where you need to look right to left instead of left to right, just be aware that VLOOKUP's not going to work for you. And we will get onto a function now that can do what we call left-hand lookups. So this function here is the XLOOKUP. Now, if you can master the XLOOKUP, honestly, you probably won't need to use any other lookup function because the XLOOKUP can do what the HLOOKUP and the VLOOKUP can do and more. So mastering the XLOOKUP is very good, and you'll be able to use the XLOOKUP in most use cases. So let's just hide these for the time being. So I'm just going to hide this bottom table here, and we're only going to do a horizontal HLOOKUP. So as I said, XLOOKUP can do a horizontal and a vertical lookup all in one function. It just depends on the parameters you put in. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to type in x, oh, I need to put equals, not dash, x lookup. And here we've got the parameters of the formula. Now, it's similar to the other lookups, but here we've got lookup array and return array, and that's the key difference here, and that's the part that enables us to do left-hand lookups and bottom to top lookups for horizontal lookups, that sort of stuff. There's also a few optional conditional terms in here as well. But again, we don't need all of these necessarily, but we'll go through them just so you can see what they are. So lookup value, again, the same as before, just the value that you want to find, which is going to be where my lookup value here is here in this sort of peachy color. Now, the lookup array, that's the range of cells where you want to find the value that you're looking for. So you want to find the lookup value. So the lookup array in this example is actually just going to be this top row here, because I'm only looking for the number 1. So I'm only going to be looking in this top row here. The return array is the range of cells where you want to return, where the value you want to return is included. So that would be this here. So from sort of I to M on the row 4, I4 to M4. Now, this is the section that really separates the XLOOKUP from the V and H lookups. Because we can specify where we want to look and where we want to return, that gives us a lot more flexibility with this function. So this is why we can do an an H lookup and a V lookup with this one function. So the next sort of this optional if not found, this you can basically just display a message or do something else if it doesn't return a value. So say we look for 1 in our parameters that we specified and nothing comes up, we can say, I can put in here not found, and if it didn't find it, it would return this not found. That's what that if not found does. The match mode is the same as before, but we've got a few extra match types now. So obviously we've got the exact match, that's the same as before, we'll try and find it exactly. You've got exact match or next smaller item. So this is good when you're working with numerical values, particularly if you're looking for pricing or something like that. You can try and find the exact price or the next smallest item. And same with this one here, you've got exact match or the next larger item. You can try and find the exact price or maybe the next largest price. So those would be some good use cases for those two modes. And the last sort of match mode you've got here is the wildcard character match. So this is where you can try and match with a few things that crop up that might not necessarily be expecting. This is kind of like the alternative to the approximate match. I'm just going to put the 0 in here for the exact match. And search mode, so you can search, so you can determine how you want to search the array. So you can search first to last, last to first, ascending and descending. So again, this is actually important because when you use lookup functions, it will only return the first value it finds. So if you have an example in your data where, say I'm looking up the lookup value 1 here, and the lookup value 1 appears 2 or 3 times, it will only return the value associated to the first occurrence of that value it finds. So if you do have that instance and you do want to do a lookup still, you can specify the search mode to make sure that you are getting the exact one you want. But generally, if you're doing a lookup and you've got multiple of the same, you probably don't want to be using a lookup. So in this one, I'm just going to put first to last. It doesn't matter here. Close that off, and you can see it's worked the same as before. Okay, so there's the example of the XLOOKUP working as a horizontal lookup. Let's just expand my other table. I'm just going to collapse this one for the time being as well. So let's look at the XLOOKUP working as a vertical lookup now. So again, we're going to go to the XLOOKUP. So the lookup value is the same as before. The lookup array, so remember last time it was the range of cells where the lookup value is contained, where we want to find that lookup value. Now, this time, because we're doing a vertical lookup, we're going to be using columns. So it's going to be this column here, so column 1. And the return array is going to be the column where we want to return the value, basically. So that would be this column 2 here, because we don't have any other columns. But if we had like a column 3 or 4 or whatever, you could specify that. So I could have like column 1 and column 3 as my, just column 3 as my return array. And again, the optional parameters are the same as before, so I'm not going to go over those again. So I'm just going to close this off this time. And as you can see, it has worked as a VLOOKUP. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change this just slightly to be a left-hand lookup, and I'll just show you how that works as well. So I'm just going to kind of copy the same format that we have at the top here. Okay, so I've just put like an LV lookup here, so that just means left vertical X lookup. So the lookup value, I'm just going to do a quick data validation here, and I'm just going to make a quick drop down. So now I want to return these kind of A, B, C, D, E, F. So if we do our X lookup again, our lookup value is going to be obviously just the lookup value, the same as before. The lookup array, so this time the lookup array is actually going to be column 2, because that's where the lookup value is contained. So we're going to be returning column 2. I think I've got all the cells there, can't quite see. And then the return array is actually going to be column 1 this time. So you can see how we're now looking from right to left instead of from left to right. Now this sort of lookup, as I mentioned before, would not work with a VLOOKUP. So this is kind of one of the positives of learning an XLOOKUP. So just going to close that off. You can see we've got an NA come up here. That is because I haven't actually specified what the lookup value is. If I pop A in there, you'll see now that it's come up with 1. And we can go down and we can see it's come up with 2, which is 2 here. So you can see now that doing a left-hand lookup actually works with the XLOOKUP. So I actually have a bonus type of lookup here that I'm going to show you now as well. So this is utilizing 2 functions together actually, and this is called index match. So we're utilizing the index and the match functions to essentially emulate the action of a lookup. So I'm going to just clear this quickly and I'm going to put index match in here, just so we can see. So before we actually get into how the formula works itself, let's actually look at the kind of the two functions here, because now we've got two components of the same formula essentially that we have to understand. So let's look at the index function first. So if I just type equals index, so we've got actually two options here. Don't worry about that too much because we're only going to be looking at the top one here. So what we've got here is the array. Now, again, if you're not so familiar with data terms, all the array is just the range of cells where your data is contained. So if you have your data contained in a table, for example, it will just be your table. Here, our array, because we've got column 1, 2, our array will be just this whole section. So if I click and drag that, you can see that. So that's the array here. Okay. Then we have row number and column number. And these are actual numbers. So we're going to put in a specific number here. So if I wanted to return, let's say, the third row. So because I've included the column headers in here, this is now actually technically the first row. So this would be 1. Then the data starts on column 2. If you didn't want to have column headers in there, you can just remove them. They're not necessary. But just for this example, just be aware of that. So if I return, say, row number 3 here, and then I'm going to return what's in column 2. So you can see here that it's returned B. So if we remember, so the row here is 1. This one is 2. And then the one underneath is 3. And we asked it to return what's in column 2, which is this one. So that's why it's returned B here. Now, obviously, this isn't particularly great as a lookup because we have to physically specify the actual the column numbers here. So this is where the match function comes in, because what the match function does is it will look for the values and then return the position of that value within the data. So it will return, where the row number is, for example. So if we have a look at the match function as well, and I'll just show you that. So here you've got the lookup value. That's nice and easy. It's just this one here. The lookup array. So again, we've looked at the lookup array before. It's exactly the same here. So just where the data is contained. So I'm just going to put this column 1 here. And then again, the match type, it's optional here, but if we just look at it, you can see you've got these kind of exact match or less than greater than. So we just want exact match for the purposes of this example here. And you'll see it's returned the number 5. So why has it done this? So what I asked it to look up was this value 4 here. And because, again, we included the column headers, it's taken this column header as the first row. So this would be, if I just type this next to it, just so it makes it slightly easier to understand. So these are your row numbers. So value 4 is in row 5, and that's why it's returned 5 here. So hopefully now you can kind of see where we can combine these two functions together to kind of emulate this lookup function. So if we just delete these here, now what we're going to do is we're going to combine them into this one function to look at the index match. So I'm going to do index. My array is the whole table, remember? Now, for row number, because we're doing a VLOOKUP here essentially, we're going to put our match function as the row lookup, as the row number, sorry. So here we're going to type match. The lookup number is the lookup value, sorry, is 4. The lookup array is just this column 1 here. And again, this is something to just be aware of. Make sure that when you're doing the lookup array, so in the array as part of the index function here, I included the column headers. So make sure you include the column headers in the lookup array, because otherwise you'll return incorrect values. You'll return incorrect row numbers. So just make sure things are consistent between the two functions here. And then match type we don't need, so I'm just going to close that off. And then column number, so we want to return what's in column 2 here, essentially. Close that off, and there we go. So it's returned D. So you can see like these two are returning the same result. Now if I change this to 1, you can see it returns A, returns B, returns C. So now we've actually got a dynamic function just by combining this index and match functions together. Now index and match, you can actually use these to do HLOOKUPs as well. So let's do that here. So same as before, start with the index. Your array is just going to be your whole data set. Your row number here. So this is actually where the HLOOKUP type of the index match varies, because the row number now is going to be what we specify to look for. So we want to specify to look for in this second row here. So I'm just going to put 2 here. And then the column number is where we're going to put the match function this time. And all of this, same as before, essentially. So the lookup value is this one here in F3. Our lookup array is just going to be this one here. Remember, just include this empty space because I've included it in the array in the index. Just make sure that aligns. And match type we don't need, so I'm going to close that off and close it off again. And there we go. So we've got D returned here. So if I change this to 1, you can see you've got A, B, C. So you can see now this is also working as a HLOOKUP as well. So I just thought I would show index match to you. So the reason I'm showing this is because essentially XLOOKUP has sort of replaced what people used to use index match for. So before XLOOKUP came around, so XLOOKUP is a relatively new formula, not that new. So those of you who might be using older versions of Excel, you might not have XLOOKUP in your Excel. So the way to get around this is by using index match. So index match, as I said, kind of an older way of emulating the XLOOKUP. If you do have the ability to use XLOOKUP in your Excel workbooks, use XLOOKUP. I find it's much easier to use, much simpler, and you can actually do more things with XLOOKUP. So yeah, just learn XLOOKUP. But knowing how to use index match is good, especially if you do have to use those older versions of Excel that might not have access to the XLOOKUP. So there we go. There's the common types of lookup functions that you're going to be using. Just if there's one thing to take from this video, it's just knowing the kind of nuances of each type of lookup and try to understand when you might use one over the other. So for horizontal and vertical, I think that's quite straightforward. Obviously, you can't use a horizontal lookup or an HLOOKUP to look up in a vertical table. It doesn't work. And vice versa with a VLOOKUP. So those two are straightforward. XLOOKUP, I'd say if you're going to learn one formula, say you don't know where to start learning lookup here, learn the XLOOKUP, because if you can do the XLOOKUP, you can do all of the other lookup functions. So that would be my number one tip to learn. If you're going to learn any of the lookup functions here, learn XLOOKUP. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, why not leave a like on the video? And if you want to see more content like this, why not subscribe to the channel? If you have any questions about today's topics, why not leave them in the comment section below?